You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're going to spend some time today in our leadership journey talking about the idea or the subject that is top of mind for many people, and that is burnout. It happens in most careers at some point or another. People feel overworked and underloved, and it really gets in the way of good critical thinking and good productivity. So my guest today is Dr. Gary Simonds. And Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
And as is a little bit of a custom here, Gary, give us kind of a walk down memory lane. Tell us a little bit about your journey to get to where you are today, and what are some of the drivers in the work you do for folks?
Well, I guess it all centers around a career in the world of neurosurgery. So I went through the usual ringer of med school, and then a pretty grinding residency, which in the world of neurosurgery is 7 years long, meaning 7 years after graduating from medical school, you are still in training. And back in those days, it was literally on the order of 110 hours a week in the hospital, up all night, every third night, or even sometimes every other night, and just continuing to grind it out. I guess a study in total immersion, and it was probably good that it was that way, because much of the career was pretty similar. A lot of late nights or all-nighters, and a lot of work, but obviously a very rewarding way to spend one's career. So since then, I did retire from operating a couple of years ago, but I continue to teach at medical school and undergrads at Virginia Tech.
So I guess a question I've always had, and this is going to be a little bit of a diversion, but as probably most of us, most that are listening, we've known somebody that's a medical professional that has done the grind of going through medical school and whatever additional specialty training they wanted to pursue. And you hear the stories of those long weeks, long days, and all-nighters and that sort of thing. What does that do to your proficiency? I mean, your ability to continue to absorb learning and act and react in the moment when critical decisions have to get made. I mean, how does that really play out?
Yes, I mean, talk about a wide open subject there, Doug. It is definitely subject to a fair amount of thought and evaluation. I will tell you that it has become more humane since our days, although I think a lot of people would still see it as pretty grueling. We have been mandated to keep the residency training hours under 80 hours a week. And of course, that's equivalent to 2 full-time jobs, nonetheless. And even there's a lot of cheating that goes on, or the residents keep pushing, and they're also expected once they get home to do a lot of studying. So I agree with you. At some point, you start to lose something. You lose an edge. You lose, I think, maybe more than anything, some humanity. There were times I can remember back in my residency days where I was angry when patients kept coming in. You were just so dog tired that at some point you lost a lot of your empathy. Nonetheless, the flip side to it is the real world in medicine doesn't necessarily let up at sunset. it keeps going, and people get sick at inopportune times. And there are times where you have to run overtime no matter what. So I'm actually a fan of a lot of kindness and a lot of a better planned out training of our medical professionals, but also throwing in some definite adversity training. I guess I use the Navy SEALs as an example. I don't think they go on some days out there at Navy SEAL training and say, "Ooh, the water's a little cold today. We won't do our exercises." I think they say, "Get in the water and do your job." And so I think an element of adversity training is probably good for us. It's probably good for us in all industries, but certainly in medicine, we're called upon at times to kind of go above and beyond.
Well, I think for anybody that's gone through that kind of training, and you brought up the SEAL training in the military, even in my day, basic training in the military demanded duty and work above and beyond what you thought you were able to do or what your body was telling you it thought you were able to do. The demand was to go further, do more, and you have this aha moment that you really can. You're capable of performing at a higher level than you might otherwise, mentally prepare yourself for, or even physically be prepared for. There is an extra capacity in the human frame to be able to do that. But I do think the question comes, you can do that in sprints, but when it turns into a marathon, how do you manage that? And so I guess that's the starting point of our talk on burnout in your case and your experience. How do you manage that long-term perpetual grind, and what are steps you took to maintain some level of resilience and focus and capability?
Well, Doug, I may be the poster child for how to do it all wrong. I think in some ways I wrote 3 books on the subject, and I think I should have entitled them, "Do as I say, not as I did." But no, you're right. If it morphs into this is all you know and this is all you do, I think it actually begins to warp our mental map of the world, our perception of what's normal and what's not. And so, for example, in medicine, one of the things we see a lot, and it's not just in medicine, again, I've seen this in all different industries, but what we see a lot is this, what I call a suffering contest. It's like we've gone through that rigorous training, we've gone through all that adversity, and now we want to show everybody else that we can outsuffer them. And so we literally, I was the first in and the last out. I've seen the most patients. I did the most call. I did this. And it's really a warping of what we would probably want in our world, certainly what we would want for the other people around us. I think, generally we want the people around us to have decent, happy lives. And yet there we are trying to shame each other for, not suffering as much as we do. So yeah, there is a lot of factors in it that really can drive behaviors that are counterproductive for us. What did I do? I worked too hard. I was definitely a workaholic. But what actually got me out of bed every day, and I think this is, one of the key points in building resilience and wellness, what really drove me were the patients and their families. And in the books and even a novel I wrote, I tried to underscore what I could only call a grace, a unfathomable grace and bravery to the patients I cared for and their families. I mean, these people were coming down with the worst things that one could imagine, and their families were facing, us coming out and telling them that their loved ones were paralyzed or brain dead or, horribly injured or stroked or whatever. And I mean, time after time, every day, many times a day, it was responded to with just, again, unfathomable bravery and a calmness and a grace that I just couldn't imagine. And truly, I think that was one of the things that absolutely made everything else easier. And I guess it boils down to meaning, the concept of meaning. So one of the mantras that we repeat in the resilience business is meaning is an antidote to burnout. If you can get a sense of meaning in your day-to-day, it can really cover up a lot of the other stressors. It can really lower the stress level.
Yeah. Well, you packed a lot in there, and I guess a couple of things that I want to highlight. Number one is the idea you mentioned, that suffering contest and trying to get it out. As you were describing that, the thought that came to my mind, and I have seen this a lot, and I've coached executives against this, that is the idea the individual leader might be highly motivated, highly engaged with his own sense of meaning and purpose, so is driven, first in, last out, all of that. But often that what goes with that is a subtle message that the people in your organization that report up to you or look to you they infer the meaning that they've got to compete at that level. They have to be, clocking the same hours, and they need to try to beat the boss in and stay longer and be the last out when the boss finally leaves. And oftentimes when that dynamic is working, when I really challenge the leader, they will be the first to say, "Oh, I'm not asking anybody else to do this. It's just what I like to do." And then I have to counter with, "Yeah, but you need to set the level. You need to communicate that, because if it's unspoken, people are going to assume that that's the standard and that's what they need to live up to. And they may be there burning daylight and not really have a specific task to work on."
Yeah, I mean, it just super points there, Doug. The absolutely, if you're in a leadership role, I certainly was. People are modeling their behaviors on you, and they may be fearful of exhibiting other behaviors. And so again, here we are exhibiting behaviors that are absolutely counterproductive to our mental health, our emotional health, if we're engaged in these suffering contests. And we often said, really what we should be celebrating is, look at this, guys. I am going home and having dinner with my family. And let me tell you what a joy it is to sit around the table with your family instead of this, oh, I can work well into the night hours and starve myself. And I haven't seen my children for 3 weeks. And so if we start modeling behavior like that, our people begin to realize, hey, that's okay. And ultimately, obviously, the better shape they are emotionally, the better performance they're going to give us. So, it's we're being counterintuitive when we think we're just going to force people into this model of out suffering one another. And as you pointed out, it literally gets as absurd as making work. Is I am just going to find a way to make myself miserable, even if it's not there, because I've got to follow the boss's lead.
Yeah. And that's a very real dynamic. Like I said, I think it's an unintended consequence that leaders create in the team environment simply because they might be incredibly motivated and tied to the sense of calling or purpose in the work. And they literally just love it, and they've figured out whatever deal they need to figure out at home with the spouse and family, and that's the way they're going to operate. But again, I think the solution to that, if you're the leader that is prone to be that profile, You need to communicate that to your team and make it very clear that this isn't a trick question. This isn't a fake exam. That it's a choice that you've made, and others need to make their own choice. But I agree with you totally. At times, the boss needs to be the one to say, "Hey, everybody, it's 4:30. Let's shut it down. Let's go home and make it home in time for dinner and tuck the kids in bed and do what you need to do." And I think a leader needs to be thinking about that on occasion as well, especially those that are highly, highly driven. The other thing you mentioned is this sense of purpose and calling and being driven by the commitment to that purpose. And as you were describing your version of it, I thought about, again, many times in my coaching engagements, I will ask leaders about their sense of purpose and calling for the work they're doing. And for those that are very well aligned in purpose fulfilling work, they tend to be, there are no boundaries. They tend to apply and work diligently, maybe even creating a kind of a grind for it because they see the opportunity and they know there is a reason for being available with those extreme hours. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think in my world, it was just absolutely palpable and in your face, the meaning of it all, right? And I think it's there, certainly in all industries. I mean, we're all making contributions to keeping this society going, and bringing each other comfort and hopefully prosperity and all that sort of thing. But it may be a little bit more removed for leaders in certain industries where you're not just seeing this absolute one-to-one ratio of what am I doing? Oh, I can see the meaning right there. The patient is getting better. You may have to sit and think about, what am I doing? What am I contributing? But it goes on multiple levels, going back to the people who are working under us. There's plenty of meaning there that can be harvested if we recognize as leaders that we're really there to support and protect and project the members of our team. It's not really about us. I mean, once we reach that kind of leadership level, hopefully it should all be, what can I do for the people working with and for me, the people under me? How can I again support them and keep them from making the mistakes I may have made?
Right.
How can I protect them? How can I increase their capacity so they feel their meaning? And then finally, how do I project them? How do I put them out to the rest of the world so the rest of the world sees their qualities? And hopefully in the end, we derive much of our meaning from seeing them succeed, from seeing them, improve and increase their capabilities.
Yeah. Very good point. And another thing that, as we talk about this, I think about, and I'm going to describe it, and then I'm going to ask you. And if it's too personal a question, tell me so, and we'll go another way. But there's a tool that we coaches often use when we're working with people, because we do try to address the whole human being, not just the work, not just one target area. And to get there, there's a simple little diagram that it's had different names, but it's popularly called the Wheel of Life. It's a kind of a pie chart that's got 8 segments to it, and work is only one of those segments. So work and career, you've got family and health and finance and other areas, hobbies and interests. And the question to the client is, so here's your graph, start at the center. It's a grade 1 to 10, 10 on the outer bands. how do you rate each of these segments as far as what you're doing right now? And the outcome is often the first try at it. The honest answer is, well, maybe the 1, 2, or maybe 3 segments are all of my time and attention. And so I rate them 8, 9, or 10 in what I'm doing. But then you look at the other segments and they're really lacking. There's not a lot of attention, not a lot of focus. And if you think of that diagram as kind of a bicycle tire, if you ever tried to ride a bicycle that had a giant dent in the rim, it's a bumpy ride. You're not enjoying the ride very much, and that becomes kind of a picture of life. If these other areas are not getting the focus and attention that they need, you're probably, truth be told, you're probably living in kind of a bumpy life. You bounce back and forth. You've got success at work, but now all of a sudden, family, friends, health, your own health, maybe even your finances are suffering because you're not paying the right amount of attention in those areas. So if you had to do a wheel of life at your pinnacle, what do you think your picture would have looked like?
Yeah, not so great. Definitely overemphasize certain components and neglected other components for sure. And looking back, when people ask me what would I do differently, I think I definitely would have paced myself differently instead of all in attack all the time, every minute of every day. We have a similar attack on this, a similar approach, and it comes up every time people talk to us about work-life balance, because work-life balance gets discussed a lot, certainly across our society and absolutely in the medical world. And one of the things we try to stress is that if you measure your quote balance by time, by a stopwatch, you're going to be probably pretty unhappy with your balance no matter what happens, because pretty much work is going to win. For anybody on a successful arc, at least, or whatever we want to define success by, work is going to take a sizable portion of our days, and certainly sleep does, and activities of daily living will, and it leaves very little time for those other things that define us and define our lives. And so what we try to encourage is to look at it somewhat differently, to take time completely out of it. And rather than that, look at it in terms of successful engagement, if you will. And we ask people to take maybe 4 to 8 elements of their lives, sit and really think about right now in time, because it's going to change through the years. But right now, what are 4 to 8 elements of your life that are really important to you, that you really value, that really give you definition and make you believe in who you are? And plot those out. And instead of a wheel, we put them on a bar graph, and just plot on a bar graph these 4 to 8 components of your life, hopefully some in work, some at home, and rate them. Your y-axis is simply how engaged are you? How successfully engaged are you? At the bottom end, it's dead on arrival. You're really doing poorly. At the top end, you're knocking it out of the park. And just wing it. Just draw a bar graph for each of these components, and how am I doing in each of these components? And you'll quickly see, as I would have, per your question, that there were areas where I was failing miserably at engaging at all. And rather than saying, oh, I have to shift time, it's more, I have to figure out, how do I invest more of myself, invest more energy, invest more engagement? So we might see that, my friends are super important to me, and yet I haven't talked to one in years. How do I engage them more? Maybe the friends that are close by, staying healthy and staying in shape is also important to me. Maybe I start inviting them to the gym when I go. Let's just get together and go to the gym, or let's go hiking together, or something like that. But figure out, how do I engage more, and stop measuring it by the absolute time that is being given to each of these.
I think that's brilliant. And the other dimension of that comes to my mind, if you are focused on the time allocation, how often have you heard stories, or even I've been guilty of it myself, time-wise, I'm at home and I might be sitting at the dinner table, but I'm thinking about work. So I'm not engaged with those around me at home. Not really. I mean, yeah, I hear them and I can react and respond to what comes up, but I'm not really engaged. I'm mentally somewhere else. And it happens both ways. I mean, certainly people that are struggling with a home life, they're at work, but they're not thinking about work because they've got this upset and challenge on the home front. So there's this yin and yang of the tug and their emotional tie. So I love the idea of, if you're going to evaluate this balance, you've got to do it on the level of engagement that's going on. The flip side of that is, and I learned this thankfully a number of years ago, if I was at work and I had that little voice tell me, why don't you check in with your wife, just see what's going on? Well, I learned the hard way that the moments I didn't do that, there really was something going on that I should have been plugged into. And when I did do it, it didn't take long, but it was an opportunity to engage and have a quick discussion. Maybe she was trying to make a decision about something, and it was helpful to just bounce it off me. And I didn't have to be the final voice on it by any means, but just having that connection and that little moment of engagement was meaningful and allowed the harmony that I wanted to create to be healthy.
Yeah, what a great suggestion. You're making several points there too that I think are really important. But one of them, with this last one particularly, is we had multiple mantras, but one mantra is no guilt for self-care. And we have a tendency, again, if you feel like you're a high-powered person, you're gonna, take the work world by the horns and wrestle it to the ground. It's like we have to keep our other being completely separate, and we are just gonna focus in and drive. And if we even give ourselves a momentary break for connecting with our families, for connecting with our friends, for looking at the sun for a few moments, we start being overwhelmed by guilt. And yet what we're doing is probably the most important things we can be doing for ourselves, to keep going. So yeah, this absolute concept of no guilt for self-care. And then the other thing I think we have to be careful of is vilifying any component of our lives. If we have deemed these components of our lives as being important, we can't then vilify them and say, no, we have to keep them at arm's length at various parts of our day. They are important to us throughout our days. And I think we do that, with work sometimes, even though we really may blossom in it and be enthralled by it. At other times we're angry at it and mad at it, and we vilify it. And I think we have to look at work as being hopefully one of those things that actually does bring us meaning and joy and energy in life. And that graph I was talking about, the bar graph, we could even take work and have its own graph and break up the constituents of our work into the parts that really mean a lot to us and that we really want to engage in. And for different people, that's going to be different things. One might, be climbing up the corporate ladder. Another might be simply, getting the job done. Another might be caring for, the people we work around us, and so forth. And we can make our own, work graphs as well. But we don't want to vilify any of the components of our work, and we want to see if there's a way we can encourage our engagement through all of them. And with this graph thing, we certainly recommend that you check it out. You make a new one every so many months and see what your progress is. Are you doing better in certain areas? Are you doing worse? And then obviously over time, certain things are going to drift away as being so important to you, and other things are going to come in.
Yeah. Well, in overarching all of this is something that I've taken away from the COVID experience as one of the pivots that I consider I've made, and I've subsequently tried to weave it into my coaching practice, and that is, this popular term work-life balance. I've actually advocated that balance is not the answer because, and maybe this is just really drilling down on the word, but to me, the idea of balance means a give and take. You've got to give something up to allow something else to happen. And in the very old, version of a scale with the two trays pivoting, and if you want to keep it in balance, you got to add something over here, take away something over there. And I think that what the COVID experience showed us is balance is not the answer, but it's creating this harmony. It's kind of like, with the word harmony, the analogy I picked up is kind of like a large orchestra. You've got a bunch of movement going on at the same time on radically different instruments. But when the conductor can get everybody on the right beat and on the right time, playing the respective notes that they're, asked to play in this piece of music they're playing, you get this beautiful harmony of sound that, really does work. And I think the harmony idea, both balancing and working or leveraging home versus work, many of us were mandated during the lockdown. You were locked in at home. You had a spouse at home that might have a job. You had kids at home that needed to do some form of schooling, and there was this incredible chaos going on. And if you were the leader of the home and you didn't figure out how to conduct that symphony a little better, you had nothing but noise. But if you could harmonize everybody's time and effort and energy, you could get a little more sanity, a little more production, a little more calm, a little more resolve through the challenge of the experience. And I have when this subject comes up with clients and they start lamenting the sense that they're out of balance, my question is, well, are you trying to do the wrong thing in finding this notion of give and take in your life? But what if you thought about how to let it occur simultaneously? But then it comes back to your point, and I love your word, and I'm going to embrace that and adopt it into my dialogue, the whole idea of engagement. And again, in the moment when you need to engage, can you fully engage with the attention you need, the emotional connection you need to have the moment? Because guess what? The moment that you need to divert and do that may not be all that long. It may not be a 12-hour shift. It may just be, I'm going to spend 10 minutes with my spouse, my child, my friend, my colleague. But when I'm there in those 10 minutes, I'm going to be fully engaged. Everything else is going to be turned off, and I'm going to make that connection.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the idea of the symphony. And I guess I'm going to go back all the way to what I would consider the very roots of building our resilience. And that is the idea of it's often termed self-compassion or emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence about ourselves. It's awfully hard to start getting that symphony to merge, to harmonize, if we don't actually understand ourselves. How do we mesh with the others in our environment if we don't actually understand ourselves, our needs, our wants, what drives us, what makes us happy, what makes us sad, what stresses us, what adds energy? And so, like, one of the first steps that we push is the idea of actually taking, this time I'm going to say time, taking some time periodically, sitting down and just thinking about ourselves, something that we often will feel guilty about, something that will, self-flagellate about, historically, but actually sitting down and coming to understand what exactly are our needs, what are the things that are going to drive us, what are the things that are going to drive us crazy. Because it's going to be awfully hard to fit in, to have all the jigsaw puzzles fit together, or all the instruments harmonize, if we're sitting there blowing a totally different tune because we don't even know what we want or need. So, early on, we think it's really important to understand ourselves. And one of the better, metaphors that I've heard of late that I quite like is the idea that we all kind of have a bank of energy within us. This energy is what drives us to get up and get out of bed and do whatever we do, and go to work when we're going to work, and pick up an instrument or write a book or whatever we're doing. You need a certain amount of upfront energy to do that. And everything we do, every interaction, every experience, every environment of the day either makes a deposit in that bank or makes a withdrawal. And it really is very important that we come to understand what are making the deposits, and seeking to have more of that. And that's going to be the things that we want more engagement in, right? In that bar graph. And what are the things that drag us down, that sap the energy? And we've got to figure either A, how do we have less of those, or B, how do we respond to them in a more productive way?
Very good point. And I love the bank account analogy in that, and you're absolutely right. As we go about our day, the moment by moment, they either can help add to and make us feel fulfilled about where we're going and what we're trying to do, or they can be that, pardon the word, but that suck factor that just drains us and takes us away from everything that we're aspiring to do. And obviously you can't avoid every one of those moments that's the negative, but I think what I heard you say is you've got to be protective and cautious of the need for the opportunity to have those plus elements, those positive moments that attract. And not to be overly dramatic by it, but what came to my mind as you were describing that, I have occasionally started working with an executive at very, popular and reputable brand name companies. And the more we talk, all of a sudden, I'm inclined to ask the question, do you think you're really in the right role, the right position at the right company? I mean, I'm hearing you lament the rub between your view of the world and life and versus what the environment there at your company is. And it's not to say that the company's wrong or my person is wrong, but it's just not a good fit. It's not a good alignment. It would be almost like, I don't know. Well, I think of people that have gone a particular career path because their parents kind of forced them into it. And at the 15 or 20 year mark, they wake up and go, I just hate everything I'm doing. And there's nothing about this that feels right. So they often choose to make a pretty radical pivot and maybe even depart an industry or depart a kind of business and go off in a wholly different direction. And then, they find the thing that is a good fit and a good connection, and all of a sudden they're a totally different person.
Yeah, I mean, a great point, Doug. If we went back to, forgive me for keep cycling back to this bar graph, but if we made a bar graph of work alone and broke work down into the components that bring us meaning and bring us engagement, and we look across that bar graph and we say, my work has none of this. It offers none of this. I can't make it fit. Well, then I would argue we're definitely in the wrong place. I personally, for example, I seem to thrive on chaos. I worked in a trauma center and the helicopters were coming in every other minute and somebody's dying or somebody's going paralyzed, and we're getting calls from the ICU that a patient is sick, and I found it all thrilling and energizing. There are other people who would be like, this is awful. I can't have this many stimuli coming in at once. I want one problem at a time that I can, really dive into, where, my world was, is kind of superficially putting out fires as much as you can in multiple directions. And there would be no way that you could fit the calm, collected person into my work. Now, there is neurosurgery out there that is far more organized and far more sedate. So even within the same industry, within the same job title, you could probably find what you wanted and needed. But if you can't find any of those components, yeah, it may be time to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, Gary, on that note, we're about up on time here for today. I really thank you for sitting in. I think this was a great discussion and should be very much help and encouragement to those who may be listening. If folks are curious and want to know more about you and your work, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, thanks for asking. I think by far the easiest thing to do is just to go to my own website, which is myname.com. So it's Gary R. Simonds, SIMONDS.com. And I love talking about this stuff. And we can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So please, there are multiple ways to contact me through that website.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned a novel. Tell us a little bit about that adventure.
Oh, really thank you for bringing that up because it's kind of my pride and joy right now. I wanted to write a kind of not an expose, that's the wrong term, but an eyes wide open glimpse into the neurosurgical world, the modern neurosurgical world, what it really looks like, what's happening to the patients, how they get there, what we do for them, kind of a lot of the drama and the tragedy and the successes and all. And at some point, and I written down vignettes through the years, but at some point I decided that, nonfiction, which I had written, for the entirety of my life, might be, in the end, just boring. So I decided to put it into a novel, which I hoped would be really immersive for the reader. So it's about a brain surgeon who begins to see ghosts, and we have to decide whether he's losing his mind or maybe those ghosts are real.
Well, and I will tell folks, you graciously sent me a copy of the book. I'm not quite finished with it yet, but I tell you, it is a great work, and I've really enjoyed the storyline and the work you did putting that together. I can't wait to see the end. Don't tell me. Don't.
Well, you're too kind.
I'll get there on my own, but yeah. Well, again, Gary, thank you for sitting in and joining us.
Oh, it is absolutely my pleasure.
Well, folks, we are going to bring this to an end. Thank you for spending your valuable time listening, and I certainly hope it has been helpful for you. As always, there is a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives of all our other episodes and things that you might have missed. And if you have a topic or an idea and want to share that with me, just drop a line. You can hit my website at dougthorpe.com, and there's a lot of links there that you'll be able to contact me one way or the other. So with that, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, and go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.